I'm here with Heather. Is it the Heat Party?
That's it.
She's got a huge fight this Thursday night against Callista Salgado at Sony Hall in Times Square, New York City. And if you couldn't tell, she's wearing a New York Yankee hat. How you doing, Heather?
Doing very well. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. As I said up front, I'm super excited to interview you. I interviewed Floyd about a month ago. I interviewed Oscar for Virgil Ortiz here, and I'm here in Dallas. It's not every day I get to interview someone that I think has a hell of a story. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first off, let's start with the nickname. I'm a big nickname guy. You know, I grew up with Iron Mike, the Body Snatcher, Mike McCallum, Hitman, Sugar Ray. Where did the Heat come from?
Well, Heat is like my name, Heather, right? Heat. And my first coach gave it to me because I bring the heat. I always was from the amateurs, a pressure fighter, no back down, no quit. So kind of just made sense. He gave it to me.
Well, it's a hell of a nickname. And I know it fits your style. But before we get into your actual fight coming up Thursday, can you tell me your journey a little bit? Tell people that may not know your story. I know you got a late start to this game. I think you're in your mid-20s. Then I think your first pro fight at 28, if my research is correct. How does that happen?
Yeah, I was actually 28 when I had my first amateur career fight. I walked into a boxing gym. I had my first fight 3 weeks into training, and I won, and I was like, oh, I like this. It was the first time I ever felt like I was good at something. And you can't get me out of a boxing ring. Since I did 18 months in the amateurs, I won every title you could win as an amateur: nationals, golden gloves, metros, regionals, and won a bunch of kickboxing titles as well as an amateur. And I turned pro at 30, turned pro in MMA at 35. I just kept reaching higher. Wasn't happy, wasn't making enough money. Advocated for equal pay for women throughout my whole career. Did the best I could in New York City. I won a world title, Madison Square Garden on HBO, only the second female to do that. And I only made $20,000. So this comeback for me is really me looking at 40 years old at some girls finally making money and thinking, wow, I just missed it. And I really had to do some soul searching and think like, did you just miss it? Can you still do this? You still got it. Can you get back in there? So this fight is my mile marker to see if I can really go up against these young girls.
And I want to talk about that here in a minute, because I know you fought Amanda, and you had a big fight at Madison Square Garden. We're going to get into that. But what was your inclination like growing up? Did you like the fight? Did you get into trouble? Like, what was your background as a kid? Because most people usually have a tough upbringing.
I mean, tough is relative, right? Like one person's tough isn't another person's tough. I grew up in a working class Irish neighborhood. At any given day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody's parents were home because everyone's parents worked 2 jobs just to keep us. It's all kids running their brothers' home with keys around our neck. And from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, the oldest kid ran the neighborhood. You know, the oldest kid in the house ran the family. That was me. Just growing up in a community like that, like I got my ass beat by my friends' siblings, my parents, my friends' parents. You know, it was no thing. They catch you with a cigarette, they beat your ass. You know, drag you home, throw you to your mom, and then your mom will beat your ass. You know, and I learned from when I was young. You get tough. Don't be scared. Get tough. I wasn't a troublemaker. I didn't start fights or anything like that. But 1989, 1994, much different time than we growing up now. Like
Right.
it was not to say rough, but you get your ass beat any given day looking at somebody the wrong way, and
Right.
and you just learn to be tough and take it on your feet. So if anybody looks at my fights, that's probably the one takeaway, right? Like, damn, that girl's tough.
Yeah, and you post those pictures that grown men would be scared to look like that. When you first got like hit it with in a boxing ring, what was that feeling like? And to hit someone.
I had, like I said, gotten hit before, and I'd hit someone before. It was an adjustment with the headgear. I remember in the very beginning, like I can't see anything. It just felt so cumbersome, and having to fight for 3 minutes. Usually, someone breaks up a street fight before you hit 3 minutes.
Right.
So it was a lot of adjustments, but just that idea, I'm a professional fighter, but I'm also a boxing coach and trainer. I have another job. And one thing one of my clients taught me once was that there are three kind of people in the world who get hit. The first guy gets hit and he runs home. There's no coming back. Second kid gets hit and he's like, stop. Why did I get hit? I don't want that to happen again. And the third kid gets hit and just hits you back. And I just am that third kid.
And you went to college, right? You graduated
I
college,
graduated forensic psychology.
which is probably a good degree to have in this sport. You need a lot of psychology. And so you got into the gym, kind of fell in love with it, and the rest is history, I guess, as they say.
Yeah, sure is. It was the first time I ever was good at anything that I was passionate about, and that was part of what drove me to get my daughter out of a working class neighborhood. You don't have after school programs. The state doesn't fund, sports and things like that. It's all community funded. We had softball and Girl Scouts, and that was all girls could do. So when I found boxing much, much later in life at 28, I was like, wow, I'm good at this. It made me see I needed to expose my daughter to more things as a child so she could find what she loved soon.
Did you ever watch fights growing up, or like follow,
No,
like Christy Martin, who's a legend, Layla Ali? No, you weren't into boxing.
I'm a fighter, not a boxer.
There you go. There you go. So you turn pro. You end up winning, like you said, a bunch of smaller titles, and then you won the WBO featherweight against Shelly Vincent. What was that feeling like? And how old were you then?
I was shit. I was 38, maybe. What was it, 2016? 2018? I was about 38, 37, 38. It was definitely like a height, like I just felt like, how much higher can I go after this? I won my world title on HBO at Madison Square Garden as the co-main event. Like, I became a world champion. I mean, where do you go from there? Right? Where do you go from there? And that was that feeling I had. It was like I was 2 or 3 months, I was just high off of it.
And then you get to the fight with Amanda. You lost the title, but you went the distance with her. Any solace in just being in the ring with her? What was that experience like?
I was unconscious for the first 6 rounds. I remember I was sitting because the first round was like a fucking tornado. And I remember sitting on the stool coming after and going like, oh my God, what the hell? Thank God they didn't stop it. And everyone was yelling. And then the next thing I know, I see the girl walk by with the 6. And like everyone's screaming and I'm looking at the girl. I'm like, that's a mistake. Why isn't anyone saying that's a mistake? I thought it was the second round. And like the coaches are like, would you listen to me? I was not there for that fight. I was not there for that fight.
Wow. Well, and now you see what Amanda is doing. Fought Katie Taylor. Were you at that fight by chance, being in New York?
I couldn't. I was in Long Island and didn't get back in time. I had tickets to it, but I never made it to the Garden.
What did you think of the fight, and did you think that the right person won?
Oh my gosh, I think it was one of those fights where whoever you were rooting for, you thought won because it was so close. It was so competitive. There were moments in every round where one of the girls did something spectacular that just made you go, oh my God, like the rounds just went back and forth. And I'm a politician. I'm not really one to say what I think or who I thought won. And perhaps that's the fighter in me, knowing what it feels like being in the ring as opposed to somebody watching the fight. But I thought both girls won. That was a great fight for women's boxing. Start.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned at the onset, I wanted to get your take. Do you feel like now we're seeing kind of a renaissance here, like women's boxing, right? We talk about Amanda, who's, I think, 38 herself, but then you got Claressa Shields coming up. You got some of these younger women coming up. Do you feel like you're in the wrong air just by a tad, or are you satisfied with when you came up?
The thing is there were girls who came up before me that hung up their gloves when I was making my run, right? And making my waves. And I was on TV and I was getting commercials and I was at the Barclays and on Madison Square Garden. And there were girls before me who really felt like they were of the wrong era. And I think that every generation of women to date, including the present ones, right? Including the present ones are at the wrong generation, because for as much as we say it was historic, it was groundbreaking, it's more money than these girls have ever made, it's still not boy money. And yeah, of course, everyone's going to go, of course, Heather would say that because she's just never happy. But it's true, because one day girls are going to be making boy money, and we're going to be asking the generation before, who maybe made $1 million, where the next girls can make, $10 million like the boys do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be asking those girls if they were in the wrong generation. Women's boxing is still in its infancy. Women were first allowed in the Olympics in 2012. We're first allowed to compete nationally and internationally in 1997 and 1999. We're talking our lifetime, where girls weren't allowed to spar in boxing gyms. Bruce Silverglade of Gleason's used to have to close the gym and let the girls fight at night in the basement. So we really are, while it seems like baby steps, sprinting towards equality here, and seeing each generation light one another's torch is really beautiful.
Yeah, and to your point, they made a big deal about Amanda getting $1 million from Jake Paul, but to your point, she sold out Madison Square Garden, which 99% of males would never do.
Yeah, and it's the idea that women have to be thankful for getting more than we ever had. And it takes a woman who's kind of stepped back and not in the spotlight anymore to say something like that, because when you're in the spotlight and you say it, there's a lot of negative feedback, though it's very true. It's very true. It's yes, no freedom till we're equal. It's great. Things are happening and it's so great and it's beautiful to watch. And God, I wish I was in this generation where I could make some of that money that these girls are making now, but it's still not equal yet, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that was sort of my point, is that obviously maybe it's the Jake Paul effect, kind of changing the game a little bit. What are your thoughts about what Jake is doing, especially with Amanda?
I think he's doing a great job shining a light on how badly women have been promoted to date, right? Like, I think he's shining a light on how badly men in the industry have treated women to date. Like, the idea is always, I'll just give her more than she ever got, right? So $20,000 to fight on HBO, more than I ever got, right? HBO didn't want to put any money, but they were like, hey, whatever. Well, she'll be happy enough just being on the broadcast. And oddly enough, I was. Me and Shelly were. We were happy to have the visibility and to take the step without the money, right? I mean, but Jake went above and beyond and gave more, right? Like, I've seen him at his fights, not only just the women, but for the undercard fighters, take his own purse and separate out money in both for the undercards, fight cards that got canceled, where he'd give out training money to people. He's generous with his money, where the sport of boxing generally isn't, right? So I think he's kind of shining a light on some of these promoters like Eddie, kind of saying like, look what I'm doing, why aren't you doing that? And Eddie really has no choice, right?
He's definitely rattling the cage and the status quo in boxing, which I think is a great thing for women in general. So let's talk about these mega fights before we get to your fight. Claressa Shields, Savannah Marshall, and then Mayer-Baumgardner obviously didn't take place a few weeks back due to the Queen passing, but the show must go on. What are your thoughts on those two matchups?
I think it's a great night for women's boxing. You have two really highly anticipated matchups that have been kind of hyped up and talked about for so long. I think Claressa, I've said this before, I don't think she can be beaten in a boxing ring. I don't think anyone can beat her. She's got skills, she's got heart, she's got drive, and she's just determined, she's got the attitude that just can't be beat. So I don't see anyone beating that girl. I think the co-main event is going to be so exciting. I'm terrible at calling fights, so I wouldn't even insult someone by thinking that they couldn't win. But both these girls have done a great job hyping this huge fight. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and you mentioned Claressa and her heart, and obviously, you have the biggest heart, out there as well. You both did something that not very many people have done: go from boxing to MMA. You did it. You had a few fights. What was that experience like? Because it's completely different, apples and oranges.
Well, personally, I can't speak to anyone else who's done it, but for me, it was a publicity thing. I wasn't making money in boxing. They were offering me more money in MMA. I made more from my MMA debut than I did from my world title fight. And everything just said, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, I do it once. What's the worst that can happen? And I won my first fight in Madison Square Garden by knockout. I remember being on my knees where Billy Joel plays his piano, and 40,000 people were going, Hardy, Hardy. It was one of the top 5 moments of my life. I got a lot of stitches after those 4 fights. My face looks a lot different after those fights. I won't say that I loved the experience, but I think it was necessary in my growth as a boxer.
Yeah, you mentioned the stitches and getting beat up, but you seem to embrace that as well. Is that
don't love it. I don't love it. I've had 61 stitches in my face. I could do without anymore.
Yeah, so let me ask you, Heather, and we'll wrap up here in a second. Jeff Zimmerman, FightNews.com. Appreciate the time tonight. I know you got a big fight coming up this Thursday, but for your legacy and being someone that started late and you talked about your daughters, I think it was your daughters, your kids, showing them, something different than what you had growing up and so forth. What do you want your legacy to be? Obviously equal pay and women boxing with men, but what's your overall, like as a fighter and maybe beyond fighting?
I think it's really hard for a person to call what their legacy is. You have to ask the fans and my fellow fighters what they think of me. If you ask me what I want to be remembered by, it would be my unwillingness to quit, right? Like in all my fights, whether it was in the ring or even out of the ring, fighting for more money, fighting for other girls to be on cards, fighting for money from my sparring partners, fighting for things that girls never got. I'd like to be known as a girl who just never shut up.
That's fantastic. And this Thursday, you're fighting Claressa Salgado. What do we know about Claressa, and what should we expect?
She got about 40 fights. She's been in there with many world champions. I mean, just about everybody who's fought her. And here's my thing. Heather Hardy is going into the last chapter. It was really hard for me to hang up my gloves watching these girls make money. And I had to ask myself, if I dedicated with every ounce of who I am, can I be the same girl I was at 32 and 33 and 34? And nothing can answer that question. Not me in the gym, not me on the track, not me in, lifting weights, but only me when I'm competing, not me sparring, not me hitting pads, only in the competition. So this is a really good test to see if I'm ready to go up against these world champions and if 40-year-old Heather Hardy belongs in the rankings again to go after one more world title before I hang it up.
Would you like another crack at Amanda?
I would love one, but I realize that I'm not one that's deserving of calling anyone out at this point. I have to establish that I belong back in the sport. I am 40. She's been thriving, fighting everyone, beating up girls for this entire time I've been on a layaway. I never was a fan of people who would call me out that were irrelevant. And I'm the first to say I'm not relevant right now. I'm not even in the rankings. I have to make my way back. I just know that I made 135 about a week ago. So, I've been maintaining it. So after this fight camp, I know that there's money at 126, 130, and 135. So we're going to see where I can take my weight. I'd love to go back down to 126 if my old body can handle it.
So everything really is based on how you do Thursday night, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've really put a roadblock on Friday morning, like I can't make these big plans. Like we got to see how 40-year-old Heather Hardy's going to go out there and perform. And I'll know at the end of the fight when I look at my coach. And if Hector Rockler looks me in the face and says, "Baby, I'm proud of you," I'm ready.
Well, Heather, listen, like I said, I'm so appreciative for the time. Real quick before I let you go, you mentioned you're a trainer, and I think I read you do modeling, public speaking. What else? Talk about what you look for beyond boxing, or what your plans are if you have.
So my most of what I do is I'm a personal trainer at Gleason's. I teach people there, and the owner of Gleason's has been like a father to me. Hector and Bruce. Bruce is like a father to me.
Yeah.
And Bruce is the first guy when he gets a call at the gym, if they need a speaker, a teacher, someone to fly out, someone to do a mentor, someone to do a commercial, I'm always the first one he thinks of. And I'm super, super grateful for that. I'm kind of lazy. I don't go out and look for work. I think that's the growing up poor mentality in me. I don't know how to get it, but when something comes in, I always take it. So I find myself doing all sorts of stuff. commercials, speeches, you name it.
Well, that's great. And well, like I said, best of luck Thursday night. If it's your last fight, best of luck.
No, I hope not. I hope not.
Right.
We want one more run, one more crack. So
right. Well, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not putting it out there, but no matter what happens, I wish you all the best.
thank
And
you.
I really appreciate the time.